Jon Jones is back. Well, kind of, but not really. It seems that he originally saw the post about how the White House will be hosting a UFC event. He then tweeted out that he just re-entered the testing pool. And I have to say that I'm not surprised. I was expecting this. I knew that the Aspinall fight would not happen, at least for now, but I knew we would get Jones on Twitter teasing a return. There was zero chance that he was going to walk away silently. I think this is similar to the McGregor situation. Talks of his return will always be there, and they themselves will always keep putting it out there and teasing that they will eventually return, but as fans, it's just better to not expect it and to only believe it once you see it. I guess this event at the White House could maybe open up his options more than we had originally thought. At first, the thought was that the only person Jones should and will be able to fight is Aspinall, otherwise he has no choice but to retire. He couldn't make an argument to give Blades, Pavlovich, Volkov, or anybody else a shot while avoiding Aspinall. But that may now be a possibility. He wouldn't have to fight for the title if he doesn't want to. That event would take place next year. Could that be headlined by Jones versus Pereira? Assuming Pereira fights Ankalaev meanwhile, and whether Alex loses or wins may not matter. He may want to move up to heavyweight, and if it's up to him, I wouldn't be surprised if he would rather fight Jones as his first fight in the division, even above fighting for a title. But I said this previously and I'll say it again. If you were happy about Jones being stripped and not having to hear about him again, then you were heavily mistaken. You will continue to hear about him. If Aspinall's next fight is against Gane, then the build-up will talk a lot about how Jones easily beat him. And if Gane manages to beat Aspinall, or loses, but makes it a very tough fight in the process, then get ready to refresh Jon's Twitter, because he will be tweeting all night long. I think he did it partly with Blades versus Aspinall. He was talking about how Blades could beat him, and if he had done it, then Jones would have been talking about how he was right all along, and that Aspinall's not in his level, and he's just another hype train who the fans thought was going to be the guy to finally beat him. I see people talking about this White House card, and the two fights I'm seeing being talked about the most are Aspinall versus Jones and McGregor versus Chandler. Both of those fights involve guys who will continue to talk on Twitter, but there's a pretty good chance we may never see them fight again. It just goes to show that my previous point about Jones being stripped and Aspinall being the undisputed champ just will not result in the media and fans forgetting about Jones. It's why Aspinall beating Jon was so important for the sport to move on, and Jones knew that. That's why I think the UFC went along with him for so long. He did have all the leverage. Stars in other divisions don't feel like that. The UFC is much more willing to move on from them if they don't do what's asked of them. I mean, we already saw it with the Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley saga. The UFC saw O'Malley as a potential new superstar, and they couldn't be bothered to cater to anything Aljo needed or wanted. And I'm not going to pretend to be the guy that is going to say, I don't care about Jones or McGregor returning. But what I can truthfully say is that I'm not banking on it. The sport will move on. McGregor hasn't fought in years, and the UFC has managed to find new stars, like Topuria. But I can also truthfully say that if these two were to return, then I would absolutely watch it, even if it's against an opponent who I don't think too highly of. Like if McGregor were to return, and it were against Michael Chandler, that fight has definitely lost a lot of its steam from the last time it was booked, partly because nobody believes anymore that Conor will return, and partly because Chandler can't win a fight. Jones versus an opponent other than Aspinall would still be something that I think the UFC would be interested in making, especially if it's against Pereira. If Alex were to lose to Ankalaev a second time, then I would think he's nearing retirement. Him and Jones are practically the same age, so a fight that does not have very high stakes, or any stakes at all, but rather two of the most popular fighters in the sport, headlining a card in the White House is something that I think the UFC would do. Also, this card is a year from now. It's hard to predict what the landscape might look like. In that time, I would assume Tom will have 2 more fights, and while we are all assuming that he will win those fights and remain champion, we really never know. However, having Jones or McGregor headline would probably create some stories being written about and looking into Jones and McGregor's past. Many people associated with the White House would be asked about them and why these two guys are the ones headlining the event. So it may be something that they don't want to deal with, but I think it's shown in the past that the UFC is willing to look past that, and they don't really care what kind of narratives are being put out there, what kind of articles are being written, or how social media feels about anything. It's also important to mention that the UFC has no current American men's champion, and I don't know what American would be a contender in a year's time to headline that event. I mean, an American is going to have to headline that event, right? So it could be one of those events that doesn't need a belt, but rather just a huge star like Jon Jones. So while I do think this is a really good possibility, I thought this from the beginning. As soon as Jones retired, I think a lot of people knew that he wasn't just going to stay put. Whether he fights again or not, I don't know, but we knew he wasn't going away silently. So I think over the next year, just get ready to hear a lot more about Jon Jones. But let me know, do you guys want him back in the UFC? Whether that's against somebody like Pereira, a fight that doesn't really have any stakes, or does it have to be for a championship? Or do you just not want him associated with the sport at all? And I think this was going to happen regardless. Even if this White House event didn't happen, there was going to be a reason where he was going to put a tweet out that he re-entered the testing pool, even if it had nothing to do with this event. I'm not surprised that he's back. Well, kind of back. But let's see what the future holds for Jon Jones.